to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd, and well, because MLS thought it would be a terrific idea to take a month off during the summertime to play a clear money grab tournament against Liga MX, we have soccer this weekend. So for all you Union fans that can't get enough, I'm sure you guys are loving this, but for the coaching staff, either the Philadelphia Union, Orlando City, and all the other teams around the league, they're probably not loving this since they've got tons of players going on international duty because, it's an international window for FIFA, and you would think, let's go ahead and follow the FIFA window. Nope, let's do this great tournament in the summertime, and we're not here to talk Leagues Cup because you guys know I despise that tournament and want to talk about it as little as possible. Maybe tonight's guest feels differently about Leagues Cup. If he wants to get into that, sure, I guess we'll talk about that. But joining the podcast for the very first time is the other half of the stateside soccer show, potential lost cousin of Fall Out Boy's lead singer, Patrick Stumph, and the host of the brand new Orlando City podcast, City Beautiful Soccer Club and Orlando City podcast, Logan Stump. Logan, welcome onto the show. How you doing?
Man, Todd, that was a beautiful entrance. I don't ever get that kind of love from Jordan. I've got to go talk to my producer, Jordan. I'm the better half, right? I think is what was ultimately was meant to say. No, but all joking aside, Todd, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to talk some Orlando City and a big advocate, Jordan and I, for Leagues Cup. So if you want to throw that around a little bit, I'm sure we can. But yeah, no, I'm excited to be here. I've listened to your show quite a few times, preparing for some Philadelphia Union content. So I'm excited, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, and likewise. I mean, glad to get you on, and it's been a long time coming. I think Jordan's been on a couple times, so it's only fair that I get Logan on here to talk about a team that he covers and you're a season ticket member of, and a recently credentialed media member. I mean, you went to a game, I think, a couple weeks ago. How was that in the press box?
Yeah, it was strange. Jordan actually got credentialed, and I know he was there with you first night, and he was like, thank goodness Todd was there because I don't know where I would have gone. I was like, that's a good thing because I had the opposite experience. I was asking people questions. I'm wandering into rooms that probably shouldn't be in. But no, it was great. Orlando City's fantastic, a world-class club as far as the front office is concerned. They took care of us really well. I was kind of hesitant about the microwavable food that Jordan had alluded to from certain clubs out there from that Twitter sphere that we've heard. But no, it was great. Fantastic experience. And our press box, no kidding, is indoors because, it gets frigid here in good old Orlando, Florida.
For sure. So, are they able to, remove the glass, or is it just all indoors?
That's a really good question. I think they could open it if they wanted to. Honestly, I haven't been up there and I haven't seen it when it's been open, but maybe they can open. That's a really good question. I'll have to see as the weather gets a little bit warmer. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, because I know when I was down in DC, I was pissed. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I don't want to try to bash on DC too much because, in case somebody's listening and I apply for credentials again this season, if they decide, wow, you are not talking great about us, so we're not going to approve you. So we're not going to talk bad about DC United until we're approved. But I remember one of the first people in the press box, and their layout's super nice. I'm not going to lie. They have a nice little lounge area and everything. And then you can walk up to the glass and everything where you're seated. But the whole idea of the lounge area being inside the press box, I was like, this is super nice. So, I mean, good job to DC for that. But when I got there, they had glass in front. I was like, no way. We are going to watch a soccer game with the glass, enclosing glass. I was like, the sun is beating down directly on my face. It is so hot. No AC coming down. And then maybe 25 minutes before kickoff, they take the glass. I'm like, thank goodness. And I kid you not, once the air started coming in, I swear it probably dropped 20 degrees because that sun just beating onto that glass. It was hot. Yeah. And I was like, I'm regretting this so much. And here comes the air in, and the Union defeat DC United, I think 6-0, 7-0, something like that. And you couldn't have asked for a better night down in DC, but super excited. Like you mentioned, Jordan was at the Columbus game in the press box. Happy to have Jordan there. Glad to see you got credentialed because I've heard some horror stories where it's a little bit difficult at times. Maybe not so much anymore with Orlando City, where they were picking and choosing who they approved in the press box. Well, maybe you guys are a big deal. Maybe it still is like that, but the stateside soccer podcast wants to come here, or a brand new Orlando City podcast, City Beautiful Soccer Club wants to come here, yeah, we know who you are, Logan. We got front row seats, I heard from Jordan, and they rolled out the red carpet for you.
No, yeah, no, it was great, and they've got again it's a world class organization. Just the people up behind us were helpful. It was basically the whole you know how it works. The whole back section of the press was Orlando City employees, and I'd known a couple of them just because I've done podcasts with them, and then some of them have started now working for the club. But again, they take such good care of you there, and I know Jordan said the union did when he was there as well. So it's good that these clubs, I mean, you've seen it, Todd, right? You've seen some of these clubs that just bash out local media. They've started to stomp all over people's throats. There's one in particular in Sporting Kansas City we talked about on stateside some. But yeah, no, I'm just glad that they're letting local media in, and I'm pretty sure that the people that listen to you are thrilled that you can get into the press box, because it takes a whole different that coverage to a whole different level. So
Yeah, I think so too. And it's like, when you have questions you want to ask and you weren't able to ask them before, and you're talking about, well, I would have asked this and what would the response be? Now you can actually ask those questions. And so
yep.
I think the whole media landscape's changing, where we're seeing more and more podcasts becoming the norm, where, not saying that like journalism's dying, but like newspapers seem to be dying. I mean, you saw so many people lose jobs in the newspaper industry, where things are going online now. People really aren't getting newspapers delivered, or podcasts are really taking off. And you see what's happening on YouTube. You see people making TikToks, making Instagram reels. I mean, that's the way that media is heading now. And so for the MLS teams that do realize this and allow people that do that kind of coverage into the press box, kudos on them. But like you said, there's some teams in MLS that are way behind the curve, and they're shooting themselves in the foot. But we could spend a whole episode talking about those teams. We're not going to do that. Thank goodness that's not the case with the Philadelphia Union and Orlando City. But for any new guests on the podcast, the first question I like to ask, and I know I've already asked you a couple questions. How'd you get into soccer, Logan?
Yeah, so I'm relatively new. Take it back to 2013, I guess, when I did meet Jordan and my two other roommates, Rich and Matt. I think you might have met Rich at some point, possibly, who's been around, tags along with Jordan Stump. But we played FIFA a ton, and we were getting into, I was getting into just playing FIFA, the video game. And come 2014, the World Cup comes around, and I'm like, all right, cool, I'll watch this. My brother and I bought the World Cup games when they used to be the World Cup games on FIFA, which were fantastic. Hope they bring them back. But yeah, no, we would play endlessly. Like, we would take the United States and try to win throughout the whole tournament. Never could. It was kind of embarrassing, but pretty good that it's that realistic of a video game. But no, I got into that, and then 2014 came around, and that's when I first got introduced to this tournament that is so fantastic. And I think it was Sergio Aguero in Argentina that ultimately got me interested in what was going on with soccer in general. So that World Cup, what basically happened was I was watching a lot of Argentinian games, and I really enjoyed their style of play. I really enjoyed what they did as far as how they played. I liked the 2014 U.S. men's national team. And so I was texting Jordan back and forth and Matt, and I was like, what club does Sergio Aguero play for? Because I'm a huge fan of that. And they're like, Manchester City. So I jumped onto the bandwagon for it. It was a huge bandwagon of Manchester City. But then it wasn't until, I would say, about 2019 when I started watching a little bit of MLS, more than I had been. 2015, when the club comes around, we had watched it when they really started to kind of take off in MLS as an expansion side. I remember watching the expansion draft for Orlando City. But 2019, I started watching more, and then 2020 with MLS is back. I helped Jordan cover that, and that's ultimately how I end up with MLS. And now I'm just a soccer sicko, I guess they call us now. So
yeah, sicko, as they say in extra time, right?
Yes.
This is in audio only, but this was the best FIFA game, right? The 2010 FIFA South Africa. Love that game. Played probably too many hours at times, but yeah, just like you, trying to qualify and win the World Cup with the US, it's a difficult task. But the thing I loved about that game is, like, every single country was in the game, and then you had like so many players you can choose from on the roster and everything, and you could pick people on the roster who have no chance at all in real life making the U.S. national team's roster. But it's like, hey, I'm gonna put this guy on, see what I can do. And man, those were probably my best times playing FIFA. And for whatever reason, I don't think they made a specific World Cup game after 2010. Maybe they did, but I definitely didn't have it because the 2010 South Africa game was all I needed. But yeah, it's awesome to hear how you got into soccer. Not a fan of you being a Manchester City fan, but it is it is what it is. It's cool though. It's like the first moment you saw Sergio Aguero and you enjoyed it. And like, what teams he play for? So I guess we can accept you getting in that way, not because they're winning all these titles and everything. So we'll give you a pass there, and I'm glad to have you on board in the MLS sphere because so many people, and you guys see this, I'm sure, we're Americans bash on the domestic league here in America. And people supposedly want soccer to grow, do well here in America, but people always want MLS or the USL championship, USL one, doesn't matter, to fail. And you have people that say, we need pro rel and everything. That's why I'm not going to support my domestic league. And it's like, are you really a soccer fan in America? Like, you do realize for the national team to do well, we have to produce players domestically. And you see it all over in the world. Those players might not stay in their domestic league for a long time, but they're coming up through that domestic league, and that's what we need to do here in America. But you have some people that don't believe into that. So to see you as an MLS supporter, we thank you for that and for giving MLS a chance, really, too, where um, I've shared this story so many times. 2007, watched MLS for the first time because David Beckham's over here. Compared it to the Premier League, wasn't the same quality. And I'm sure you probably had a little bit of a similar experience watching the Premier League and then coming into MLS in 2019 and really in the MLS's back tournament, which was unlike anything we've ever seen in MLS.
I was going to say it was a. I remember Jordan going, are you going to watch it?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm interested." Just because I'm like this tournament got me interested. And that's what's wild to me. 2019, I was just kind of like flirting with the legal bit, a little bit, and in 2020, that MLS is back tournament, which was absolutely bonkers. Nothing is going to happen like that again. I fell in love with the league, and Todd, I mean, just looking at it over the last 3 years now that we've covered it together on the podcast with Jordan, this league has gone from something that people looked at and laughed at, and now it's becoming one of those leagues that people are like, all right, let's go get some players from MLS because that's the point in which we got to. And I know that with you as a Union, people at Union fans and cover the club, your club is one of the ones that really just kind of generate these really good players that are going to Europe.
Yeah, with Brendan Aronson, Mark McKenzie, who just got called into the national team with Austin Trousey. So great to see two former Philadelphia Union players involved with the national team this go around. But let's go ahead and talk about Orlando City versus Charlotte FC, which Orlando fans that are listening to this podcast might not want to relive this game. You might not want to talk about this game, but we are going to talk about this game. Orlando City fall at home 2-1 to Charlotte. And I mean, what a disappointing game that has to be for Orlando fans, people in the media, for the team itself. A game where, let's face it, Orlando, in my opinion, were all over Charlotte in the first 20 minutes of this game. 6 shots compared to Charlotte's 2. But as Orlando fans soon found out, that would be the big story of this game, was the lack of finishing by the Orlando players. It wasn't that they're not creating chances. They just couldn't finish their chances. And I'm sure we'll get into that here in a little bit. But you look, only 39% of their shots were on target in the game against Charlotte. And it's great that they had 19 shots. Like I said, they're creating chances, but it's a matter of if those shots are going to ever be on target or not. In the game against Charlotte, it was not. Duncan McGuire, I thought Martin Ojeda were both bright spots in this game for Orlando City, as those two combined for Orlando's lone goal. But what are some of your takeaways from this game?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. Pretty much with this club all season, it's been when they've created chances, they don't look anywhere close to executing on those chances. I think it's been just kind of scarce in the attack, and like you said, in the first 20 minutes, in the fourth minute, Martino Hayda scores a goal on a Mikey Holiday cross that deemed offside, but ultimately that looked like one of our best attacking plays in all these matches that we've played two against Tigres, now four in the league. It looked like this was finally starting to, going to be that turning point of like, all right, finally we're going to start finishing these goals, and I think that's ultimately what Orlando City fans wanted when you play a winless Charlotte, who've looked atrociously on the defensive side, and I think that's ultimately what we wanted. But like you said, Todd, it's been constant, just create great chances, get into good space, get into the box, and get into dangerous spots, and just not being able to finish anything. And we've got a DP striker, and I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit, but we got a DP striker that, and you guys have had similar issues with strikers in the past, where it's just like, what's going on? This isn't what we paid for, and this is not the production that we need. And that's ultimately been Orlando's Achilles heel, is just not being able to get on the end of those created chances and put the ball away. And I think that's slowly what Oscar's trying to realize. Or starting to figure out that there are people on this roster that can, and it's not coming from our DP spot that we hired, that we signed. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty telling in the offseason when you guys, it seems like, brought in like 6 different forwards this offseason. So that tells you everything you need to know. And to see Carr not be what Orlando City fans thought that they were getting. I mean, yeah, look, he scored a nice bicycle kick against Tigres in the CONCACAF Champions League, but you expect more out of a DP striker and somebody that has all the physical tools. Like he seems like he would be a great striker for MLS. I mean, he's your typical striker, good hold up play, or supposed to be good at that with the type of body that he has. And it's been everything but maybe a different system would do him well. But when you bring in a player that was doing a great job in the Austrian Bundesliga, which I know is not saying much, but there's a reason why Orlando City brought him in. There's a reason why he was linked to multiple other MLS clubs, and Orlando City, uh, had deep pockets, were able to get the deal over the line. But it's not what the front office, it's not what the coaching staff, it's not what the fans thought they were getting in Carr. And it's why we're seeing somebody like Duncan McGuire get chances, and he's going to continue to get chances when he shows that he's able to combine better with Ojeda, with Facundo Torres, with some of these other pieces on the roster. And so that's a big loss if Orlando City say, you know what, come summertime, we're going to try to sell you. And if we can't sell you, then maybe a loan will do. But then they're still going to be on hook for having 3 DPs on the roster if they loan them out, unless the team, I believe, sends like a little bit of a transfer fee to take them out on loan. But we'll see what happens in the summertime. Maybe that doesn't happen. But yeah, it's not a great problem to have if you're an Orlando City fan, to see your DP number 9 not putting the ball back in the net. And like you said, the Philadelphia Union have had plenty of strikers over the years not put the ball in the back of the net. Maybe not so much as a DP, because let's face it, the front office did not like bringing in forward DPs. And now under Ernst Tanner, who has proven that he has an eye for talent, so far so good with our 2 DPs, strikers, and Mikhail Uhre and Julian Carranza. But we saw after the game too, a video on social media comes out that fans interrupted Oscar Pareja's press conference. I mean, what do you make of all that? I'm sure, Orlando fans are upset. This isn't what they thought the season would be like, where you have a ton of people that are saying, oh, Orlando City won the offseason with their signings, and we're 4 games in and they've only got 1 win, and they lose at home, a place where they've been shaky as well in the past. So what do you make of just the fans interrupting Oscar's press conference?
As somebody that's been in that room, I can say that it's not the most difficult room to find. So I'm not shocked that they found it. That was a big thing going around Twitter for some reason. That was the big focus on Orlando City Twitter. It was like, how did they find this room? And I'm like, it's really not that hard. It's not. But I think the biggest thing to take away from that, Todd, is just the fact that, like, yeah, it's not going. And I think because people projected us to finish so highly this year and have a pretty decent season last year as well, I think we've always been projected to be in that top 4 conversation. inception, and we've just not lived up to those expectations. And people are starting to kind of grow weary of Oscar's time in Orlando, which I don't think is very valid at this at this stage in what he's done for Orlando City. If you look at where we've come from since our inception into the league, we were awful without Oscar. It wasn't until Oscar that we start to finally put in some good development in young players, finally get an academy system that is worth a darn, finally start to look like, I mean, honestly, we look at the Eastern Conference and the Philadelphia Union have become that blueprint of a franchise. It's become that let's build it like they've built it over the last couple of years, because that's where they've seen success. And that's how I think Orlando City's kind of taken that blueprint and tried to run with it as well. They've tried to run with, let's build it from the ground up. Let's build it with some youth. Let's infuse it with some good international talent. And I think that's ultimately where they've kind of focused. But Oscar, sitting in that press conference, I think he felt it all coming to that its head and to its point where fans are just frustrated because the creation, I think, is just not there. Like we've had all these new attacking players and it's just not translating into goals. And that's what Orlando City fans want to see. But I don't understand that because we're such a gritty team. We're not a team that's going to go out there and score, 3 or 4 goals a game. We've never been that. So I don't understand. Like, yes, I get it. We've got more attack infusion, but I think that's just so we can win these games and take it over the top. We're not that club that's going to go out there and score 70 some goals in a season. It's just not us. So it's interesting to see the pushback, but honestly, Oscar got our first silverware. We just played against Tigres and El Volcan and drew and brought them back here with a chance to beat them. There's not many coaches out there in this league having covered it that are going to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you guys held your own. And when the draw came out, I remember like people on Union Twitter saying, "Oh, Orlando City is going to get blown out." And down in Mexico, I mean, Pedro Galese, of course, played lights out in that game. 11 saves, I want to say. Maybe it wasn't, but it sounds about right.
No, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, good.
You're right. Yep.
Came off the top of my head. I mean, they needed that performance down in Mexico. And they come back home. Like you said, they had a shot. And it wasn't enough. And I know Orlando fans were upset about the away goals rule where, because Tigres scored at the Exploria Stadium, they go through. But I don't think Tigres did anything to blow Orlando City out of the water. Maybe that's a credit to Orlando City because of what Oscar has been able to do with them defensively. I think something you hit on is the thing with Orlando City now is they have an identity. When they first came into the league, you didn't know what you were going to get. That's great that they have Kaká and you have a legend in Kaká, but is he going to win us trophies at that stage of his career? Probably not. I think that signing was more so to get fans excited about the club. And then you have Luis Nani, who has won everything with Manchester United, who's been a star with the Portuguese national team. And you thought, okay, he's going to take the reins from Kaká. And it wasn't there. But you started to see that identity under Oscar Pareja and what he was building with Orlando City. And now we see Facundo Torres try to take those reins from Nani. And how long will Facundo Torres be here with Orlando City? We shall see. But the one thing that, like I said, stands out to me is there's a clear way how Oscar wants this Orlando City team to play, where when they first came into the league, it just felt like, okay, we're out here just to play. And that's not really the case so far, in my opinion. And you're talking about it, where they're not going to blow out teams 4 or 5 goals, where in 4 games so far, their finishing ability has let them down. Their shots on target percentage is at 31.7%, which is tied for the 9th fewest in MLS, and only 3 goals up to this point. But this isn't an issue just for this year. This is what Orlando went through last year. The same thing. 4 goals scored in their first 4 games, and only 30% of the shots were on target in their first 4 games. What's the reasoning that Orlando seems to start slow, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of a couple things. I think it's just the fact that like we've never had that guy up front that's going to put balls away. I think with Nani, they rely heavily on him, and then in the last year, not really having that. Like you said, I think we've just been a team that's kind of been out there without an identity, without a real goal scorer. When DK comes back, he's not healthy, so he doesn't score. You've got Ercan Kara, who you bring in as a DP last year, scored 11 goals. I think it was 11. But it was just ultimately not good enough. And I think there's a lot of room for improvement, and he's not what you need in this league. You need a top scorer if you're going to be one of those competitive teams, like you have a Daniel Gazdag, like you have a Hani Mukhtar. You need somebody like that if you're going to kind of break over that, or at least have 2 or 3 players that could get you to that total. And we just don't have that. Like Facundo Torres is just not going to score that many goals. Like it's realistic to think that if he got to 10, it's a good season for Facundo. And I think, creating in the midfield, creating in the wing, that's more of his opportunity. But when you don't have anybody on the end of those balls, you can pass there all you want. There's nobody that's going to finish that. And I think Ercan Kara really struggles in this league just because he doesn't seem to fit the system. And I think you hit it perfectly. I think it's time for a different look up front, because I don't think that this is Oscar's system just doesn't work to what he wants to do. And I think that's ultimately what, if Orlando City decides that, Orlando City is going to be a better team. And I think once they decide and put it beside, yes, it's going to stink to be able to have a DP striker as your third string option, but that's ultimately what's got to happen. And fans are going to be mad because they're like, you spend that much money, why not spend on something else that's better? Well, we can't, because we made the mistake, but now we can correct it and play Duncan Maguire.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And it's a tough pill to swallow where your DP is third choice striker. But, I think it's good for, transparency from the front office, from the coaching staff, to come out and say, look, we botched this. Not that they're going to say that when Carr is selling the team. They're going to hope that they can get the best out of him, that he can fit into the system. But it's looking more and more likely that that's not going to happen. And I think, Orlando fans are going to let that frustration come out of them, where theoretically, I mean, this seems like this should be a good system for Carr to play in, and for whatever reason, it is not. And for what it's worth, I don't think this is exclusively just an issue for Orlando City, because Jim Curtin talked about this at the beginning of the season, where he says the hardest thing for your team to do is to get the offensive clicking at the beginning of the season. So it's no surprise to see Orlando struggling in that department, because there's plenty of other teams that struggle with that. The Union are typically a slow starting team as well. And I know we have 7 goals in 4 games up to this point, and they have 38% of their shots on target, and Orlando fans would absolutely take that. But Jim has a point, to expect a team to come out flying like we're seeing with Atlanta United, which, are they there? Is this okay? Is this just for show? We shall see. 5 goals against Portland at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. That's why that was one of the most intimidating places to play a few years ago. And teams aren't going to be putting up that many goals at the beginning of the season all the time. And is Atlanta the exception? Maybe they are. But I asked Jim Curtin today at his press conference about, analytics. How can you determine if you guys are on pace to where you want to be? They had 64% of the shots on target against Montreal, and I asked them, is that what you want to see more of? Do you want to see more first-time finishing? And this is what Jim Curtin had to say.
Yeah, percentage-wise, that's probably better. That's a higher number. We've been a team, I think, if you look at our conversion rates through the years, we're pretty efficient in front of goal. Some of the data and the metrics right now is going to be skewed. So if you analyze and look at all of our games this year, we've had red cards one way or the other in almost all of them. We've had just different elements that have gone into the game that have maybe led to some different kinds of data and different kind of numbers. So I think as the season goes longer, as you see more 11 versus 11, we can start to pick and choose analytics that support whether we're doing something good or whether we need something to improve on. But right now, it's been a little bit strange, including the Champions League, where you factor in the field we played on away, and then you factor in playing up a man for 48 minutes as an example. They're really all tough to judge and analyze right now. I still think we've played for good stretches. That's why Matt and myself bring up that stretch, because to your eyeballs, that looked like us, and I think that was us getting stronger. Conversely, though, we hurt ourselves by getting the red card and now have to scramble and try to survive at the end of the game. So we have a good team. I'm confident in that. I know our fans see that, and I know that they'll be behind us when we play Orlando on the weekend.
So the whole reason for me playing that clip, from Jim Curtin's mouth, maybe that makes Orlando City fans happy, more comfortable to hear, Jim Curtin admitting that, look, the data and everything, we can't rely on that. Beginning of the season, a lot of our games are skewed, and Orlando City could say the same thing too. It's 4 games into the season, and yes, I know I just talked about them having a similar start in 2022, but at the same time, it's only the beginning of the season, 4 games in, and that doesn't mean anything. It's 4 games in, and yeah, you don't want to lose to Charlotte at home. You want to get all 3 points against them. But again, it's only week 5 now in MLS. So your thoughts on Coach Curtin's comments before we go into the next topic? Anything to add there?
I think it's interesting, and I guess I've never really thought of it that way. And then I think it's good that you bring up this point, just because I know if there are Orlando City fans listening to this, they want that instant production. They're like, okay, well, how come the Union can do it? I'm like, well, the Union have been. These guys are. It's most their they've retained most of their players in that starting 11. Orlando City, I mean, if you look at it day to day, I mean, there's 3 or 4 new faces on the pitch at a time, just dependent upon. And there's guys that are just coming back from injury. Both of our center backs last year were out for most of the season with Janssen and Antonio Carlos. I mean, just missing time. Antonio Carlos still isn't back yet. And I think that's just a huge thing I think it's a huge testament to how good Oscar has been. Just the fact that he's had so much rotation, that there is so much new in this. And I think that's interesting that Jim points that out, because he's kind of said the same things in his press conferences, where Oscar's like, I'm proud of him. Like, I'm proud of the way that we're playing. We're creating the chances we need to create. They just need to finish. And Pat Noonan, your guys, former, he said the same thing when he was down here when I went to the Cincinnati game, and Pat said, you know what? You look at a team like the Union are going to create chances. They're going to but they also defend. And he said the same thing. He said he liked to talk to Jim oftentimes about the fact that, like, to start a season is impossible, no matter how many returning players are coming in. So I thought that was interesting that Jim is kind of harping on that. Is that I think Orlando City fans just don't listen to that as well. I don't know if Union fans do, Todd, but I know Orlando City fans are very tone deaf at times. So it can be a little interesting, because I think that we all just need to calm down. I think it'll be fine. So.
Yeah, we'll see, because Union fans were in full meltdown mood against Montreal and everything. So Jim Curtin's confident in these players. Will the fans? Jim Curtin says, look, the fans are going to believe in these players. Maybe not some of the fans, but I think majority of the fan base aren't panicking yet. And it's week 5 now coming up in MLS, and no need to panic. But great segue into you talking about new players, 2-3 new players at a time on the roster. And I'm sure we talked about it, how people said Orlando City won the offseason. They brought in 10 new players. Martin Ojeda, Ramiro Enrique, Rafael Santos, Luca Petrasso are all great signings, in my opinion, where I'm high on all of those players that I just mentioned. And there's so many other players that we can talk about too. But what are your thoughts on the players that Orlando City did bring in?
Yeah, so I think the first one I like to mention all the time is just Gaston Gonzalez, just because people forget that he was signed last year. He didn't come over because he did suffer an ACL injury. He had been playing in Argentina, but never did travel to Orlando City. So we're getting our first look at him this year. It's like a new signing, which we made last year, and it's worked out phenomenally. He's come off the bench most matches, and he actually played and started in the Cincinnati game. I thought he looked phenomenal, and he can play all over the place. He's up and down the left side oftentimes. You can find him on the wing, sometimes in the midfield. He can even drop back into a left back if he really needs to. That's the good thing about Oscar's squad, and you'll notice a lot about a lot of these Orlando City players is they can play pretty much all over the pitch. And I think that's Oscar's big thing, is that guys that can join in the attack. So, and you hit on Luca Petrasso, left back. Joao Moutinho had been just a stellar player for us for so long, but then injuries caught up to him over the last year and a half, just hadn't been the same. And Luca Petrasso coming over from Toronto in that trade, just an amazing left back fit for Orlando City. And like many people said, it's all about fit. We talked about Cara before. Petrasso just fits whatever Oscar's, doing. It fits because it's that, join in the attack, come off the left side, join in and really just kind of add in a different kind of flair, and then also be able to go back and retreat back and play defense on a counter. And he does extremely well in both. He's able to recover extremely well and also join the attack and puts in some great balls. I think Martin Ojeda is a huge signing. I think he finally, and I Twitter messaged you this, that finally Martin Ojeda in the last 45 minutes looks like what we were promised as Orlando City fans, and somebody that covers it. I can honestly say that the fans were hyped about the way that Martino Hayda played in the second half against Charlotte. So I think another one. But again, looking at the whole list of guys, the biggest one to me and the most impressive so far is not even a signing; it's a draft pick, and that's Duncan McGuire. I think he's got Daryl DK kind of vibes to him, and that's the way it feels. It feels like he can be a 10 to 15 goals scorer as a rookie, and I think that's a pretty big step. We kind of need some more from other players like a Facundo Torres. He hasn't played as well, but again, all these signings, Todd, I think Martino Hayda obviously is the biggest one, but I'm looking more at Duncan McGuire as somebody that I think I see having more of an impact on this team.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, Orlando City fans would take that if they can get Duncan McGuire scoring 10, 15 goals, especially as a rookie. But if people listen to Extra Time, they're all high on Duncan McGuire, and I think
Yeah.
I think Orlando City were too. Obviously, that's why they drafted him in the first place, and he does seem like he has that pedigree where there is no fear in him, and I think that's huge for players coming out of college, where it could take some adjusting from the college level to the MLS level. But when you watch him play, I don't see any fear in him, and that's the number one most important thing for me. I think when you look at whether it's players coming from overseas, whether it's players that are coming out of college, do they show fear? If they don't show fear, and they don't have anything keep them down in their heads, I think they're already on to a step to succeed. Not saying that they will, but so much of the game's mind games, and for a young player to come in and be asked, "Hey, look, you're going to replace a DP. We do have a DP player on the roster, but that's a big ask for a college kid to come in and say, look, we know we spent millions of dollars on this DP. We're going to give you the keys to lead this front line." And Duncan McGuire has shown well when he's been called upon for the club. And will he get to 10, 15 goals? We shall see. You mentioned Moutinho leaving the club. You also lost your starting right back, Ruan. Junior Urso was also at the club for a while. What are your thoughts on those changes right there with those two players?
Yeah, I think Joao Moutinho, that one was less of a sting just because of the injury history. But yeah, like he'd been a player that was scouted by European teams. I know that there were quite a few European teams, especially Premier League teams, that looked at Joao Moutinho. But over the last year and a half, I think that's the one. If you strike down on the list, that'd be lower. I think the biggest one for me, and I think fans will agree with this one, is Junior Urso, just because he was the heartbeat of this team, and he came every day ready to play, gave 110%, center, defensive mid. He could go up in the attack as well. He kind of played a 6 or an 8. Really good at both spots. Filled in as a 10 when needed. I mean, the guy did everything. And I think the fans just adored him. His celebration is phenomenal. He's the bear. So he's all over our signs here. People love him. When he left, it was the biggest rattling on Twitter, even with Nani saying that he was retiring, with Kaká leaving. I mean, those are big names here in Orlando, but I don't think anybody had such a pushback that Urso did, just because he's continuing to play. He's going back home, but he's missed tremendously just because of how much he meant to this club. And honestly, if Mauricio Perea or Nani weren't the captain, Urso's right there with them. So again, I think Junior's a huge loss. And then Ruan too. I think he was a heartbeat at the right back spot too. Those guys were just energizers, and they are guys that. And I'm glad that Ruan is getting the starts that he is in DC, just because I felt like he was starting to lose it a little bit with injuries and stuff. But I'm excited to kind of see what he does with DC United, just because I don't feel like they're a serious threat to Orlando City. But it is nice to see him still in the league. So. But yeah, some massive losses that Orlando City had to deal with this offseason.
It does have that feel of the change of guard. So
Yes.
it's not been the start that Orlando City has won it this season, but the good thing is, I guess, the club identified that there needs to be changes, and they brought in those changes. Not that everybody's going to fit in year one. Maybe some of these players never gel into what Orlando City is building, but it's got to feel nice that, okay, look, Orlando City, they identified what they need to upgrade, and they did that this offseason. And we'll see how many of the players stick, how many of them don't. But real quick, before we talk about this game on Saturday, Andres Perea is a player that you know well in Orlando City, with the Union and Orlando City agreeing into a trade this past offseason, where Orlando City received $450,000 in 2023 GAM and then $300,000 in 2024 GAM. And when you look at Andres as a player, you see him as a defense first player, and um, they just had a lot of options in Orlando, whether it be Junior Urso, whether it be Cesar Araujo, who's I think one of the most underrated number sixes in all MLS. It's mind blowing to me that not enough people are talking about him. He's one of the key players, if not the key player. I know Facundo Torres gets a lot of praise, but if you have a good number six, which Orlando City does have, a player that will be playing in Europe, I believe, in a couple years, you're doing something right. And it all starts at the backbone of your team. You've got to get a good number six. Orlando City do have that in him. You also have Wilder Cartagena. So, I mean, Andres Perea was disposable, as harsh as that is to say. But you look at him, he's defense first, like I said. He can play both ways, Jim Curtin said. He can tackle. He's great in the air. We've seen that early on in his appearances against Alianza in the Champions League. Jim Curtin was also talking about how he can arrive late in the box, can shoot from distance, but they want him to get closer to goal. And they feel like he can be a goal scoring threat, even though, he's defense first. And this is Jim Curtin explaining how they view Andres Perea.
Yeah, Andres has had a great start to the season for us. Obviously, former Orlando player can factor into it as well. So again, a guy that's earning and deserving of minutes. He's a great player. Really, really high quality, both with the ball and without the ball, and has done a great job for us. Added the 2 goals in Champions League, which were really big and important. So I think he's growing in confidence now. He'll certainly play a big role this weekend, and he deserves that. He's a special talent and still such a young player who's been around in the league for a little while now. But I think sometimes we forget how young he is and how he can still grow and get better and better each and every year.
Fair assessment on Andres Perea. Your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I was always really high on him. And like you said, and you actually said it on our show when we were previewing the Union, you said it perfectly. Orlando City just didn't have anywhere to put him. And that sounds strange, but he just didn't fit because you have Araujo, you have Cartagena, who comes off the bench and plays that similar kind of position. You have Mauricio Perea. I think people forget he slipped back more into defensive midfield positioning now. He's no longer the 10 for Orlando City. So you've got a massive group of guys there in that midfield that just clogged everything up. And Andres Perea, unfortunately, was that guy that just could not get on the pitch. And I actually used to tell Jordan, like, he's 20, I think he was 22 at the time, might be 22 still. But he's got such potential to be that guy. Like I did feel like he could really, really make a team good and ultimately grow into a player that could be, like you said, he can play both ways. He's great at carrying the ball forward. I thought like better than a lot of our midfielders did, especially those defensive midfielders. I thought he was tenacious in the defensive end. Like you just could not get by him. He's just relentless. He kind of had that Urso vibe to him, but he was so much quicker than Junior was. So I'm very high on Andres Perea. I was kind of shocked the club got rid of him. And then as you kind of mentioned, it's just because there's a jam there and there's just no way that he was going to get playing time. And I think it's a steal. It's a bargain deal for the Union. And I think they got the better end of the bargain because I do think that this kid, and you look at your guys' midfield and you got El Brujo and you got guys like that, where I think Andres learning under them is going to be better than what he was probably learning with Orlando City. Just because I feel like your veteran core group there in that midfield just are some of the best midfielders in this league. And I think that's ultimately what Andres can kind of take away with that. But I'm glad Jim sees that too, because I always saw that. I just didn't think he ever really fit because of the playing time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was super excited when the Union announced his signing, and Jim Curtin talked about it today too, saying how he can play both ways. They want him to get closer to goal. I remember having Jim Curtin on the podcast when I was at the convention. And I asked him about, can Andres play as a 10? And Jim said, yeah, absolutely. Like if we played the Christmas tree formation, 4-3-2-1, he could play as one of those two 10s. which I think's a real possibility this week, that we do see the Union go away from their 4-4-2 diamond standard formation to a 4-3-2-1 Christmas tree formation, because this is going to be the battle of who has the better depth. I mean, that's what this game should be called, who has the better depth. And you can say the same thing for all the teams in MLS, but I think the Union and Orlando City are tied for the most players going away for international duty with 7, I think I saw today, where you have Cartagena going away with Peru, Pedro Galese, the goalkeeper for Orlando City, going away, Facundo Torres going away, a whole bunch of defenders where you have Jose Martinez, Richard Odada, 2 midfielders, Daniel Gazdag, another midfielder, Damian Lowe, third choice center back. Okay, well, that's valuable depth. You have Brendan Craig, you have Quinn Sullivan, and you have Jack McGlynn all going away with the U20. So you lose a lot of depth. And Jim Curtin said it today that we're only going to have 4, maybe 5 outfield players available on the bench. And I'm sure it's probably going to be the same case for Orlando City. This, in my opinion, is not going to be the prettiest of games. Like I said, let's just name this game and who has the better depth, the battle of the better depth, whatever you want to call it. But it is interesting when you look at these matchups between these two teams, Orlando City and Philadelphia Union. The Union have won the last 3 games, where the most recent game, 5-1 trashing against Orlando City at home. But Orlando City were just coming off of that U.S. Open Cup victory, the final, and they were tired and everything. So, I mean, it's no surprise they played the game a couple days after celebrating winning the first trophy in club history. And were they up for the game? Probably not, because some of those players, I'm sure, were still on cloud 9, bringing the first piece of silverware to the club. But it's always good battles between these two clubs. I mean, look, 1-0 Philadelphia at Orlando, where I know controversial penalty not giving to Orlando City, and I'm sure fans have not forgot about that, where they feel like they were hard done not to get a penalty near the end of the game, where they thought Daniel Gazdag may have fouled them. Oscar Pareja has a winning record against the Union, which not many coaches can say. Oscar is 6-5-1 against the Union. Jim Curtin 7-4-5. We always get entertaining games, and what I love, which maybe not so much this season, in the first 15 minutes between these two teams, we've seen 7 goals, and the Union have not had the greatest start. So maybe Orlando City fans could look forward to that first 15 minutes, where the Union have conceded a goal in the first 15 minutes this season. They've given up multiple chances to Chicago, to into Miami. So could Orlando City get a chance like that this weekend? It's possible, but what are your thoughts on this series between these two teams?
Yeah, no, this one will be interesting, and I think our biggest concern, obviously, with the Orlando City side is Pedro Galese missing in action, just because Mason Sudahar has not ever looked good in any kind of appearances that he made. He only made 2 appearances last year, and they did not go as well. He is somebody that just doesn't get a whole lot of opportunities, and when you have somebody. We like to talk on our show about Andre Blake, just how good he is. And I think Union fans really do. I don't know if they take it for granted, but if you look around at the other guys in goal, you guys are one of the luckiest I've ever seen, just because he is so good at what he does. I think he's one. I think Petrovic with New England's really good. And I think Pedro deserves kind of that same kind of attention, because he has to bail us out a lot more than I think he does with the Union. We don't have quite as good a center back pairing as the Union do, but I think with Janssen and Antonio Carlos, when healthy, they're pretty formidable. One of the better ones in the league. But again, I think Galese is a huge concern not being there. But like you said, Todd, I think looking at just the history between the Union, this is the stateside derby. We've coined it just because Jordan's a Union fan and I'm an Orlando City fan. But I think it'll be I like what you called it. It's the battle of depth. It's a matter of whose depth is going to be better than the other. And I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of nervous, just because our depth at times is lacking in quality, just depending on the day, really. So I'm looking forward to it.
What kind of formation could we expect? I know they typically play with 2 defensive midfielders, but with the depth maybe not being there, I mean, can you see them put out the same old? I know I talked about, could the Union potentially go with a 4-4-2 diamond, their standard? Could they go with the 4-3-2-1 Christmas tree? I mean, there's definitely options. And honestly, like I'll make predictions what formation I think the Union will come out in when depth's in question, and I always get it wrong. Um, I don't know. Listening to Jim Curtin talk about it today, saying we only have 4 or 5 outfield players on our bench for this game and nothing in the attack, and with him saying that, that makes me think that we're going to go to the standard 4-4-2 diamond with Mikael Uhr, Chris Donovan up top. Jim Curtin said last week where he talked with Leon Flock playing that Jose Martinez role, the lone six. So Leon Flock as your lone number six, where Leon said it in the past, where he's more comfortable playing with another six if he's going to play as a number six, which that is his more natural position, but with somebody next to him. Could you get that with the Christmas tree formation? Potentially, but I don't know. I really think Jim Curtin's going to go with that same old with, like I said, Ua and Chris Donovan up top, Torres as your number 10. You're going to play Perea as your left side of 8, Ali Bedoya as your right side of 8, Liam Flock as your 6, and then your back line's going to stay the same like it always is. Somehow, Jack Elliott, Jacob Glesnes never get called up to the national team, which is a blessing for the Union. I think Norway could use help in the back. I think Scotland could use help in the back. But look, they've not called these guys up, so we're taking. And then it's a question: will it be Baza? Will it be Nate Harriel as your right back? I'm torn on this because we saw Bizo give up the game-winning goal against Montreal. We saw him in bad positioning for the game-tying goal in Montreal, and when we saw that happen last year against New York City in the past, Nate Harriel was given the starting spot, and he had that spot for a ton of weeks, and then Bizer eventually won his spot back. So right back, I think it's going to be a question mark, and Jim Curtin said, Joe Bendick 100% is my goalkeeper this week, not Holden Trent, Joe Bendick. So what do you see for Orlando City formation-wise?
I mean, Oscars really has a hard time breaking from that 4-2-3-1 that he likes to run. He's gone a couple times. It's weird. He's gone a couple 3 in the back. He's kind of played a lot around a lot with it lately, and that's not something he typically does. I think I want to say it was FC Cincinnati where he had 3 in the back. 3 center backs, and then he had the 2 wingers, like wing backs playing. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. I suspect he'll still stay with the 2 holding mids just because of the Union being how good they are in the attacking third usually. And I think, trying to kind of stymie any kind of attack from the Union is ultimately what they'll go for. Because Orlando City should have Perea healthy, ready to go. They'll also have Arujo there. So Cartagena usually is coming off as a bench option. So I think ultimately it's not a big miss with him being gone. And I think with now the equal amount of rest, I think that helps. Not having played in midweek has been tremendously helpful. So I think ultimately they go with that same kind of that similar system that he's kind of been running when that 4-2-3-1. That ultimately just throw a couple wings up there and then hopefully not Ercan Kara.
Hopefully not for your guys' case, right?
Yeah.
But hopefully for the it's a double-edged sword, right? But my 3 keys to the game, as my listeners know, I always try to do that segment when I have a guest on. Number 1, test the goalkeeper. Orlando City have allowed the 8th most shots so far against in MLS this season with 49. And with a new goalkeeper in this week, it's best to test him early and often, shooting from distance, crashing that box in terms of hooping that he spills the ball and you could have it tap into the back of the net. So number 1, you got to test the goalkeeper. 2, win those 50-50 balls, 39.7% headers won, which is the second fewest in MLS for Orlando City. And I think, on set pieces are going to be key for the Union, using their center backs' heights, using Andres Perea, who's 100% getting a start. If he doesn't get a start, I would be shocked. And he's a weapon on set pieces too. I know he's listed at 6 foot, but he gets up there. He gets good airtime. If Nate Harriel's in this lineup, he's another guy who's deadly on set pieces too. So you got to win those 50-50 balls, whether it be in the midfield, whether it be on set pieces. And then number 3, stay on sides, because the Union lead the league in offsides with 17, with Uhr third in MLS with 5. And so the timing's been off with Mikael Uhr and Daniel Gazdag or whoever's trying to feed him the ball. So I want to see the Union time the runs better and just stay on sides. And I know Orlando's struggled with that too at times this season. But these are my 3 keys to victory this week for the Union. And if the Union get 2 out of 3 of those, I do expect 3 points for the Union. But I've not given a prediction in a very long time unless I've been on somebody's show and they've asked me to. So we're not going to give a score prediction on this show. If you don't want to give one either, Logan, that's fine. But the battle of the depth.
Yeah, no, I think those are all good. The stat sounds about right for Mason Sudahar. I would go after him as much as possible. And I think similar case with Joe Bendik. I think it's a similar case with Joe. That's just the fact that it's not Andre Blake and it's not Pedro Iglesias. So it's a battle of the backup goalkeepers.
That too.
But like you said, I think, just I think you're pretty spot on as far as the Union keys, but I think some of the Orlando keys, just the fact that like getting Duncan McGuire involved, and I think that's something that Oscar needs to do early and often. And I think ultimately you don't see him for the full 90. I still think that Ramiro Enrique is still the preferred option for Oscar. I would say that defending set pieces is a nightmare just because we're a small team. Our center backs are really the only height, and Robin Janssen is not tall. He's not massive like some of your other Union players, like a Glesnes, like a Andre. Like you said, Andres Perea can absolutely get up with the best of them if we've seen it. So, I think that it's key just to, I would say, get out of there with a point. I think you're lucky enough to get out of Subaru Park. Didn't lose there last year. I don't think you guys did. And I think ultimately with the way that we're playing in the attack, I think it's going to be a challenge just because I feel like your defense is arguably still the best in MLS. So I'm concerned about that, but I think trying to get the attacking players going is key for Orlando City. I'm just not sure it's going to happen at Subaru.
Yeah, and I know I said at the beginning or middle of the show that it's only week 5 in MLS, but this is a must-win game for the Union, especially after they lost all 3 points in Montreal. And we saw what a difference it made. If the Union would have had 1 point last year earlier in the season, they would have been hosting MLS Cup. So it's important that you get all possible points early on in the season. And like you mentioned, the Union did not lose at all last season at Subaru Park. So Orlando City, their mindset's going to be, let's at least get a point. Could we squeak out 3 points? It's very possible, especially with Joe Bendik, who's looked shaky in goal. So we shall see. But Logan, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. And hopefully Jordan, I know he's listening, isn't a little bit bummed out because we're almost an hour in. I don't think Jordan and I have done that. So my apologies, Jordan. But as Logan said at the beginning, he's the better half of the Stateside Soccer Show. So where can people find all of your information on social media and all your podcasts?
Yeah, so I'll start with the Orlando one that makes more sense, I guess. Orlando City, the podcast is called City Beautiful SC. I always have to remember my name because it's such a long one, and I had to come up with a unique name. But yeah, it's City Beautiful SC and Orlando City Podcast. If you just look us up on Twitter, I think it's City Beautiful. I want to say it's 13. I could be wrong on that one. I did not write my own handle down, so that's kind of embarrassing. But maybe not as embarrassing as this game might be for Orlando. But no, you can also find us at Stateside Show. I do know that one. Stateside Show over on Twitter. That's where we cover all things MLS, U.S. Men's National Team. We actually even started covering some USL Championships. So that is really exciting. And you can always go over there to listen to Jordan and I commiserate on just how bad our teams have been to start the season. And I'm sure that your Union podcast listeners can also join in on the Jordan is optimistic pessimist for the Union. So that's the best way I can kind of put that. But yeah, no, thanks, Todd. I really appreciate you having me on. It's been a blast. And I do know that I am the better half. So Jordan, you're listening. Take that.
And if you guys aren't following the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, follow at Free Kick Pod, wherever you get your podcast, The Free Kick. And be sure to check out the website that's kind of not been updated in a while, thefreekick.net. But big plans coming. YouTube, I told you guys last episode, definitely want to get involved with that. So yeah, the website's on the back burner, but this game might be on the back burner in both of our minds after the end of the week, just like the CF Montreal game needs to be on the back burner for the Union fans and the Union players. But Logan, thank you so much for taking time out of your night. And I'm just glad that we were able to finally catch up and preview this game together. And Love all the insight. I've told you guys multiple times on your podcast. I love what you and Jordan are doing. And if you guys are looking for a place that covers not just specific teams, but the whole league, Stateside Soccer Show is your show for you. But until then, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.